Hi, I'm Jordan. I am a third year history student at University of Southampton, and I've just finished a year of study abroad at Doshisha University in Japan. Um, Overall, I had a really good time. When going out to Japan, you go out a bit later than you do at European universities, so it can be quite tough timing wise to get everything done. Hence why I'm filming at home and not in Japan, so it's just going to be quite a retrospective thing rather than an up to date in day in the life sort of thing. So I'm just going to talk about like the challenges of being in Japan, being a student in Japan, being a foreign student in Japan, being a foreign person in Japan. It gets quite difficult to name all the things you might struggle with. So I'm just going to try and cover as many bases as I can because living in Japan for a year, I found out that like quite a lot of people don't appreciate that it is just living for a lot of it. Um, so I think the obvious one to get out there is the language barrier. When everyone thinks of moving to a really foreign country, it's like, do I need to speak the language? Do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? And like the customs and stuff. I found language wise, it wasn't necessary to learn the language fluently. And I think that's probably one of the big things people have when they say, "Oh yeah, I want to go to Japan," is I need to learn the language. But especially in big cities like Kyoto and Osaka, which I was quite near to, and Tokyo when I visited, you'll get by with just speaking basic Japanese if you can speak any at all, or speak English. When it comes to courses at Doshisha University as well, they don't teach you Japanese as a compulsory thing at all. They don't teach you it. It's a voluntary subject which you can take twice a week during your main classes. So if you have a class on it was a Monday and a Thursday, third period, you won't have that opportunity anyway. So it's all self-taught. All the courses though on campus are in English. There's two different campuses, and the one in Kyoto is a lot more English speaking, a lot more international. Whereas the one in Kyotanabe, which is where I was based, it's a lot more basic English, and the courses overall were a bit easier that way, in that it was for people who were learning English rather than people uh, who spoke English. That's a daddy long legs. Uh, uh, but overall, I found that the big challenge of the language barrier never really existed outside of very official forms, mainly being moving in forms at the city hall and moving out forms at the city hall. But luckily, I had friends who spoke English and a little bit of Japanese, or enough Japanese to be able to fill them out. And it was quite a painless experience in that way. A lot of things are labeled in English, or you can kind of guess. Well, Daddy Longlegs is going crazy over here. Um, but you can kind of guess what's going on with labels. A lot of the convenience stores, things are labeled in English. It's quite like a basic day to day thing there. Uh, the academic challenges I don't really felt existed in Japan, which I think a lot of people might find quite strange. Given that Japan is quite a merit based thing with university and grades. But honestly, the work there was a lot easier than it is uh, at Southampton. The only thing you struggle with is time. Is particularly if you're suffering with jet lag, or you have plans, or you're trying to meet people or family, and you have to work around a very inflexible schedule, which was definitely the hardest part. As you can see, I got quite a complex setup going on for this with the big microphone, rather than just filming on a laptop, because my laptop broke in Japan, and to replace it was extremely hard. The rules there are very, very strict. If you want to have an extension for a piece of work, it's very hard to get that. If you want to have more freedom with your courses, it's quite hard to get. In the faculty which I exchanged at, the global communications one, it was a lot more rigid than the ILA courses, which were the sort of more international courses, which personally I think would have been better to enroll the students into from University of Southampton rather than the global communications one. Uh, I don't have much like academic challenges, more of things which happened which were quite frustrating, in particular in the faculty. Not having a representative who spoke English quite a lot. or who spoke quite broken English for someone who's meant to help you, finding it quite difficult to read the things which they give you. They're all in Japanese, and sometimes the lingo, when translated, is quite confusing or doesn't translate properly. Whereas in the ILA, it was very straightforward, all in English, American English. It's very Americanized, and also the tutors were American there. Academically, it's not the hardest work. It's more like first year work compared to the UK. Um, but it can be quite challenging when you're in that environment to get everything done. It's treats it like more like a college where it's a lot of homework, a lot of turning up, a lot of necessary attendance compared to where in the UK it's quite voluntary by comparison. Um, Overall, I'd say like academically, it's quite hard. It's quite hard to see yourself then going from what is very, for me, study self study led in history to where I'm effectively following the syllabus. By comparison, where you're not really meant to put forward your own ideas, it can be a bit of a weird jump up. Um, Honestly, I feel like from the academic side, it is more like college in the UK, not like US college or university, but like UK sixth form college. You're meant to treat it like such, and it can be quite difficult. But you do get a lot of free time because of how the terms are structured. When I went in September, they were effectively halfway through the year. I was the equivalent of joining in at December, Christmas time. Just after that term, and then I had a very extended spring break. I think it was about 2 months of spring break, and then finished my second semester on the 4th of August. So it's quite a weird timeline compared to the UK, where I know that in history you usually probably finish around early June to middle of May, early June. So having that extra 2 months in university rather than having the summer off to plan holidays is a bit weird. So the friends back home who were on holiday from their university or completing exams. Personal challenges, again, it's like being a fresher again and overcoming the challenges of being able to say yes. A lot of time, you're stuck on your own at the start. I didn't have there was no one else from University of Southampton at my university. There was only two people from UK universities in general. They're both from University of Sussex, and we kind of just had to stick together in that way. It can be quite challenging to put yourself out there again when you're not used to being back in that environment. Whereas at Southampton, you usually have like a group of friends you're associated with, or a society which you're quite close with, or you have local friends. When you're halfway across the world, you don't have any of that as an option. It's very difficult to overcome that, and what I found was that you just have to say yes. You just have to put yourself out there and really just say yes to absolutely anything. About 2-3 weeks in, I agreed to go all the way to Tokyo to stay with about 17 people who I knew about four. So it was about learning these new people and learning more about myself as well in that environment, and trying to really put myself forward in a way which, you're not going to isolate yourself. I feel like if you isolate yourself when you're that far away in the world as well, you have a lot more challenges, because if you don't speak the language fluently, or if you don't have family, it's very oppressive. People aren't going to come up to you and speak in the street. You have to be very receptive. You have to be willing to put yourself out there. And you have to be, willing to get rejected from things. Maybe people don't necessarily want you around, which comes around to being the second thing of, as a foreigner, you have a lot of unique challenges as well. In particular, one which I found was quite a few Japanese people. I met them for once, twice maybe. They saw me and was like, oh, it's nice to see a European person. Oh, where are you from? Oh, wow, that's so amazing. And they treat you quite as a novelty. I know it can be quite disheartening for people, especially people who are trying to learn Japanese, because you don't want to be treated as a novelty. You want to be treated as a person in that environment. You want to be treated as an equal there, and sometimes you're just not, and you have to be willing to see it that way. You have to be willing to put yourself in that position of I'm gonna meet so many new people. I might not like all of them, or I might like all of them, but they might not all want to keep me around at the same time. So it can be quite a unique challenge in that way. Uh, and as well, personally, you are going to get looked at. You are going to get stayed at. Just in the street, on the train, especially at Doshisha University, where I was stationed. It's right in the countryside. It's in between Osaka, Kyoto, and Nara. So you're not in a big city. You're out the way a bit. You're quite isolated, and a lot of times I was on the train just to go to Kyoto to go and spend the day there studying or something. And what I found was that I would see an old guy, peeking over his magazine at me on the train, or an old woman be like side glancing me all the way for 3-4 stops. It's quite it's you have to have quite thick skin for things like that, because if you're not confident in your appearance, or you're not confident in yourself, it can be quite disheartening. And it did affect me quite early at the start, where it was very, very hot. It's quite hot at the moment in the UK, but in Japan it's a lot hotter. I was sweating a lot. My hair was all greasy. And obviously that impacts how you feel about yourself too. So the personal challenge of that is quite difficult. Luckily, though, in the city, it's a completely different world, especially in the high street of Kyoto. What I found was you'd hear a lot more English, or German, or Spanish, or Italian, or French, a lot more global languages than just Japanese. You hear quite a lot of Korean, a lot of tourists from China as well. Um, in the big city, if you can get in there, it's no issue whatsoever. I think being in the countryside with Doshisha is quite difficult. It's a lot more difficult than being in the city. That was one of the issues I had with my faculty, was that I would have wanted to live in the city by comparison to live in the countryside, but because of the faculty I was in, I couldn't. And it's something which I feel quite uh, sorry, I feel quite aggrieved about that at times. It's not like the end of the world living in the countryside. It's just a different challenge. It's something you have to get used to. Um, but when I'm hearing people who are doing the same thing as me, who are studying abroad, who are going to live in the city, live in the heart of what is traditional Japan, when you see, I don't have any way to show images other than just to show you on my phone. Um, when you're living in the heart of traditional Japan, where you have, if it loads, things like you have the Kyoto Tower. The lighting isn't doing any favors. These brilliant and wonderful temples, for example. And by comparison, you're living in the dusty farmland. It's something which can get quite annoying, especially in the winter, or when something's happened and you have time off and you don't really have the money. The Turing grant really helped me out, because I was trying to do as much as I could in Japan. But there was a lot of times where money was stretched a bit thin, cost of living, bills, rent, etc. And what happens is you can get very isolated if you're living in countryside. It happened to me a few times where my friends were living in Kyoto. I didn't really have the money to get the train. And my other friends were away because their family was visiting. So for about 2 weeks in October, I was on my own. I was just going back and forth classes. I wasn't really seeing people outside of classes because people were also busy. And I found one of the only ways I could really cope with being on my own so early on was to just put up my Christmas decorations, which I bought out there, way ahead of time, and just say, try and make it feel like home. It's the biggest personal challenge, is trying to make it feel like home, because it's not, and I think that's one thing that's very obvious when you live in the countryside, is this is not my home. And it's quite draining. Whereas if you're in the city, it's very multicultural. People speak English a lot more. Whereas here, quite a few times we were refused service in restaurants. There was a restaurant near us which we went into a few times, and every time they say, "Nope, we're full," there'd be one person sat down, a bunch of free tables. Or, "Oh, we're just closing," and they open at 5, and we're there at 5:30. Um, it is quite frustrating, and it's quite draining on you, because you don't feel welcome in the countryside as much as you do in the city, where people are waving you in, talking to you at tables. You can find, especially in the big cities, in the nightlife sectors, you can find places. There was a lot of Irish bars, for example, where they had people employed who spoke perfect English and who had a lot of British or American or Australian or South African or New Zealand clientele, and it makes you feel more at home in the city. So I really hope that the study abroad team, would take that forward for me. That was the only thing which really impacted me. Um, like I say, you have to treat it like being a fresher again. You have to be ready to say yes to things. Um, I think one of the things I've avoided talking about is why I took part in this opportunity, and it was to get world experience, and I think I really did. I think if you are someone who, lives not in London or not in, a big city in the UK, it's quite hard to put things in a global context, and it's quite hard as well, especially as someone who's white living in in Wales. To get a more of a multicultural context of what it's like not living in the UK and being, used to the things. I think we have quite a lot of stereotypes about British people, but also, we put stereotypes on other people, and being subject to those stereotypes is a bit frustrating. But also seeing what people think of you just because you are British, or you are white a lot of time. People were quite strong about their feelings towards you, and trying to smash down barriers, and also just get an idea of what it's like outside of your little corner of the world. I travel. Well, I decided to go to university in Southampton in the first place because I wanted to live outside of my bubble, just outside of Cardiff and inside of Cardiff, and even then, I don't see that much of it. I could have probably gone straight from sixth form to a cushy job and got up there, but I decided to go to university quite far away from home to get more experience about the UK. And when the opportunity came up to go on a year abroad study, I decided I'm going to take it and I'm going to go as far away as possible. And having the option of Japan was just so exciting to me. It's one of those things where you save up for a forever, holiday, that goal which is always on your mind. It's not cheap to get out there. Luckily, SFE are really helpful in trying to help you fund the plane back and forth. But once you're out there, you can live very comfortably, really, off of the money you get from SFE, and the touring scheme is really helpful. It allows you to take all the opportunities to explore Japan. Like I say, I went to Tokyo, I went to Okinawa, I went, to all these amazing places, which I probably would never have dreamed of going if I'd just stayed in Southampton and completed my degree already. And going back, it's going to be quite difficult, but I would not change that opportunity to go out there, because the friends which I made and the experiences I had would completely trump any of the downside. It's not like I'm going to lose the friends which I already have in the UK. It's just a matter of I've made some new ones I perhaps would never have had the opportunity of seeing. And just like a final word, final tips, don't worry too much about learning language. It's not the end of the world if you can only speak very basic things. You can say hello, thank you, excuse me, things like that. So long as you know what you're going in with, the language of pointing is always there. It's obviously good to learn it or to go with someone who's learned it, but honestly, I would say don't worry too much about it if that's the thing which is really stressing you out. I can hardly speak a word of Japanese. I can speak a couple of sentences. I can speak a couple of little cues, but I'm not an expert by any means. I think I would say I'm the furthest thing from. I think the average tourist probably speaks about as much Japanese as I did in a year. Number two, just say yes. It's something which I would say for anyone, no matter what year of university you're in, on your study abroad, or if it's just as a fresher, just say yes to any opportunity put in front of you, because you might regret it, but you might not. And it's about weighing up those things. And I can tell you from experience, saying no to things in my first year, freshman year, really hurt. That I didn't get to meet some people, that I didn't get to do certain things, and it's quite hard then to remake what you don't have. At least you can say that you did it. And try everything once. I went to Tokyo with people I hadn't met before. I went to Okinawa with people I hardly knew. I kept going out to functions and to meetups with people which I just met, and they are some of my closest friends, and I still talk to them now, even when I'm back in the UK and they're halfway across the world. And the friends that are made in the dorm as well. The two of them which go to UK institutions are two of my best friends. Um, and like I said, say if I had said no to half the things which I did, I would not be speaking so positively about my experience in Japan. Three is take every opportunity you can traveling to. I think that a lot of people, if you put in Kyoto, it's quite long to just stay there, because I think I could count on my hands the amount of shops which are in that whole place. And I don't think I could tell you what half of them were, because they're not really useful to you. It's very much a farming place. It's not really that great. So go to Osaka, go to Kyoto. It does cost £10 for a return trip on the train a day, or look around what's in the local area, Nara, um, all these places in between. If you have a weekend and a bit of money, you can always go to places like Hiroshima, and you can see these amazing things. But you just have to be willing to get on a night bus or pay a hefty fee on the Shinkansen to get there. But once you get there, you're gonna have an amazing time. And I think seeing all the amazing temples. I'm not a big sightseeing person myself. I don't really like going around Europe and seeing all the churches and things like that. It doesn't really appeal to me. But in Japan, I really got into it, and I even have a Goshuin shrine book. If I can find it over the other side of the room. I got this towards the end of my stay in Japan. You have to excuse my appearance. I'm quite warm today. But I got this in Kyoto. It's a shrine book. It records the shrines you went to, and I got this quite towards the end of my trip, and I really regret it, because you get these stamps from each place. So in Kyoto, in Okinawa, other ones in Kyoto from the Gion Matsuri, the really big festival, which happens in Kyoto once a year. And it's a really good thing to bring home with you. You can just treat it with respect. And you can you can take those opportunities. Fourth tip is don't worry so much about money. If it's at the cost of opportunities, I think, especially with the touring ski money, you can get by just fine if you don't have any other commitments. There's a couple times where I did struggle a bit for money, but luckily had enough in savings that I could get by just fine. Because I did have to put down a few down payments, but honestly, you should be fine if you're working the summer before, especially. Work up a couple extra pounds, and you should be fine to do all the things you want to do. And don't let money really be a factor. If you want to go to Korea, you can afford to go to Korea off the touring money. And also just the factor of being there. See everything you can, and just think about it later. I think that a lot of people are afraid to go into their overdraft, and honestly, especially when you're abroad, it's not worth missing out because you're afraid you might spend an extra couple of quid here and there. So I definitely wouldn't say worry about your money as much as I did at times. 5, turn up for school. They take it very seriously, the attendance. I failed a course in the first semester because I didn't turn up enough. I missed, I think, 5 classes, and they said that's too many. So it can be quite annoying to do that, considering that, especially at UK universities, it's a lot more self-led study. It's a lot more self-taught things. Um, I did find that quite frustrating, but it's worth turning up as well because I did meet quite a lot of my friends in classes. You can joke. The teachers are nice. Um, but yeah, overall, I would say if you are going to Japan, or you're thinking about going to Japan, or you're abroad, um, in a heartbeat, say yes. Say yes. And the reason I say that is because you will not get another opportunity like this. It is such a unique opportunity to go there with no restrictions on yourself, no real time restriction, with no lack of, anything. It's such an incredible experience, and you'll never get anything like it in the UK. And if you really want to step out your bubble, it's the place to do it because it's so unlike the UK in different ways. Um, and to be honest, the the upside of going will always outweigh the downside. If your options are between Japan and the US, I would say take Japan for the simple fact that it's so different. You're not going to get an experience like this in the US. You're not going to see the things which I think I saw if you go to the US. You're going to have a different experience, and it doesn't feel like home. It feels different. It feels international. It feels multicultural. Um, and as someone who's done it now, I can say it's one of the best experiences of my life. So thank you for listening to my vlog about my time in Japan. It's quite retrospective. Unfortunately, I didn't have any pictures, but I think I tried to summarize as much as I could the challenges you're going to have if you do go to the same university as myself, and also the upsides to going to. And hopefully, if you have any questions, you can always email me. I'd be happy to go into further detail because I can't speak highly enough about my time there, to be completely honest with you. I know it does sound a bit long, about some of the things I talked about, especially the faculty can be a bit rough sometimes to get around, but I'd say anything which you really have a problem with, you'll never you never have a big enough problem that they can't solve it in one way or another, unless your laptop breaks. Anyway, thank you very much, and Jenny.